Are we live?
Yes.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a meeting of the Montgomery County Local Land Use Committee. I am Sarah Love. I am the chair of this committee, and along with me, we have members Delegate Jim Gilchrist, Delegate Charlotte Crutchfield, Delegate David Moon, Vice Chair Gabe Acevero. I also see Delegate Fraser Hidalgo and Delegation Chair Mark Corman. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate that. And if the other folks who are on the call could also identify themselves, that will be wonderful. We will start with the Secretary, Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to all the other members participating. I'm Jeannie Hadaway-Riccio. I'm the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, and I'm joined by some of my team members today. We have Assistant Secretary Phil Hager, who oversees the Land Resources Unit. We have Paul Pedito, who is the Director of Wildlife and Heritage Service, and Bunky Luckman, who is our Legislative Director.
Wonderful, thank you. And everybody else, just jump on in.
This is Colby Ferguson, Director of Government Relations for Maryland Farm Bureau.
This is Jane Sigler. I am the chair of the Government Relations Committee for the Maryland Horse Council, and I am a farm owner in Montgomery County.
Ann Davies, I'm a farm owner in Montgomery County.
Good afternoon. This is Cassie Shirk, Legislative Director at the Maryland Department of Agriculture.
Bob Sissel, the Director of Montgomery Agricultural Producers.
Caroline Taylor, Executive Director, Montgomery Countryside Alliance.
Bill Hamilton, Manager of Natural Resources Programs for MNC PPC Montgomery County Parks and Chair of Montgomery County's Deer Management Workgroup.
Mark Aiken, Animal Connection Deer Management Team.
Did we get everyone?
Mike Scheffel, Montgomery County Office of Agriculture.
Amy Saman, Office of Intergovernmental Relations for Montgomery County.
Wonderful.
Darius, District Director for Delegate Lukey.
Thank you. I also see Delegate Wilkins and Delegate Queen have joined us. So first off, I want to apologize for my background. As some of you heard, had a little snafu with my calendar, so I am coming to you live from the back of my car. Thank you all so much for making the time to get together this afternoon. As we all know, the overpopulation of deer in Montgomery County has been a problem for many, many years. Many of you have been working on this issue for many, many years. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to get all the stakeholders together. Last year, the budget language asked DNR to work with Montgomery County and to come up with a plan. So with that, I would like to turn it over to the Secretary so she can update us on what they've been doing and what their recommendations are.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. And with your indulgence, we do have a presentation that we would like to share. So I will go ahead and pull that up now. And please let me know if you can see that okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So Madam Chair, you referenced the JCR report. So just as a refresher, we thought we would start by sharing the exact language there, but it does call on our department to work with Montgomery County officials to develop an enhanced deer management strategy and submit a report on November 1st. So our goals for our presentation today were first to provide an overview of how we develop deer management plans in general at our department. And then second, to talk about the status of deer management in Montgomery County specifically. And then last, present some recommendations for enhanced deer management in Montgomery County. And we would welcome your feedback on those recommendations. So just to get started and to jump right in, we have a statewide deer management plan. And the first one was developed in 1998. It's updated every 10 to 15 years. So the last update took place in 2020. We do get a significant amount of stakeholder input when we put the plan together. And that plan includes both lethal and non-lethal methods for deer management. It also provides some specific goals, objectives, and strategies for our state to use. We also use methodology to determine the level of harvest for each season. So by monitoring the status of the population and also using a modified reconstruction model, data comes in as well through electronic licensing and the mandatory deer check-in program. And all of those things are foundational to us getting estimates and ultimately setting management regulations, including what the hunting seasons and the bag limits look like. We do a review on a biennial basis. That again also includes very robust public input during the process. So I mentioned that the plan contains both lethal and non-lethal options. So just a quick overview of what that means. Under the lethal options, of course, hunting remains the most effective strategy and the most effective tool to manage deer populations in our state. With that in mind, we do have a fairly liberal season and bag limit structure. And there are some statistics there on the economic impact as well. We also have two specific tools. One is the deer management permit, and the other is the deer cooperator permit. These are very important specifically for the conversation we're having about agriculture and farming today. But you can see that we have nearly 10,000 deer harvested under DMP statewide, but the potential for 30,000. And under the deer cooperator permits, we've had about 2,000 deer harvested. And the distinction there is that the deer cooperator permits do have an agricultural option, and they also provide opportunities for night shooting. With non-lethal options, these are things that we have been talking with the Maryland Farm Bureau and farmers across the state very consistently about, but one is mechanical fencing. So basically excluding access from deer to crops. There's also vegetative fencing as a strategy, which is, I like to call it sacrificial crop planting. So you plant crops that deer will eat, but basically providing a border around the crops that you're trying to protect. And also repellents. We've seen really great success with repellents, both on farmland as well as forest land. And now I'm going to turn it over to Paul to run through the next slides.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. So the deer cooperator permit, as Secretary mentioned, is one of the additional tools for really anyone who is experiencing overabundance of deer. The original version of this was primarily used for our airports and facilities that had sort of discrete operations that required the opportunity to remove deer, but in a more highly controlled manner. And it sort of raises the bar for the folks who participate in this by requiring both a practical test and a written test. A couple of years ago, we set up an agricultural version of this, which offers farmers to the opportunity to shoot deer at night and beyond the constraints that are in the deer management permit and the hunting season. Currently, that option exists in the months of February and March. Again, they can shoot at night. They can use centerfire rifles, suppressors, infrared, night vision, a variety of tools that are not authorized otherwise. Last year, we had 43 deer taken. The vast majority of those were Sika deer taken at night in Dorchester County. To date, we haven't had anyone from Montgomery County apply for this tool. I will say that the folks at MNC PPC use the non-agricultural option of this tool to take deer in a variety of ways in the county. So it's used, but in a different way. Excellent. This slide demonstrates sort of the overall antlered harvest, which gives us a sense of the deer population across the state. So the darker the slide, the greater the antlered deer harvest per square mile of deer habitat, and therefore the higher number of deer per area of habitat. And if you look at Montgomery County, no surprise, it's sort of split into your into that rural agricultural zone. And then as we move sort of south and east, and we get closer to the DC line, the both the harvest and the deer population estimates go down. But you're sort of right there in the middle in terms of total estimated deer population per area of habitat. And then a statewide look at the total trend. I know in some areas it feels like the deer population hasn't changed at all, but in fact, at one point back in the early 2000s, we were close to 300,000 statewide. We're now hovering below 250. And as the secretary said, we take annually take about 50,000 antlerless deer and a total of 100,000 deer out of this population. So it is a trend that's trending down. Notwithstanding the fact that there's locations and sort of pockets that we struggle to manage to this day. And then specifically to Montgomery County, in terms of your total harvest, percentage-wise, the good news here is that we've shifted that paradigm now going on more than 2 decades, where the vast majority of the deer taken in the county and statewide are antlerless, or that portion of the deer population that contributes to the growth through reproduction and recruitment of young. And this is, Montgomery is one of the counties that really has, for many, many years, shifted that paradigm and the philosophy of their hunters. And then you can see the total numbers here, again, consistent with that statewide population estimate. The total deer harvest is down going back to 2008, 2009. And that sort of runs both consistent with the statewide reduction and when we really sort of took the gloves off of deer management across central Maryland and did things like eliminated the back limit for our archery deer hunters. And you can see the effects of that. So we put this slide in here just to give you a sense of what could be. Washington County is very similar in terms of deer management to Montgomery County. And in many ways, it's similar in the rural areas to the deer habitat that's available. And you can see what happens when you sort of amp up opportunity and create access to those deer. The trend here doesn't mean that there are fewer deer in Washington County. It means that they figured out a way to get to those deer in those pockets. And this is one of the outcomes of doing a number of the things that some of which you're already doing there. We spoke about deer management permits. These are also known as crop damage permits. This is the tool that our agricultural producers can use during daylight hours, but 365 annually. And we issue this very liberally. The trend down was the window when we added the expanded seasons and very liberal bag limits so that farmers didn't have to rely on DMPs for a number of years. And now we're starting to see a tick up statewide as folks are finding the tool useful for their particular situation. And Montgomery County tracks with that pretty closely. This is crop damage harvest on those crop damage or deer management permits. Again, it drops down in the window there where we saw hunters much more aggressive after we expanded and liberalized the seasons and bag limits. And now it's ticking up. Again, you take just about 500 deer in the county on that tool. One of the things to note, and the secretary alluded to this, is that these aren't used to their full potential. So total statewide of just about 10,000 deer are taken on these tags out of a potential of 30,000. And in Montgomery County, that number is about that's proportionally about the same. So about 39% of the total available tags are utilized of those tags that we hand out. And then this slide, although it's a little bit cumbersome, but I can tell you that, you know, if you look down to Montgomery County, and each of those columns that shows open for Sunday hunting is generally means that there's Sunday deer hunting opportunities in those counties. As I'm sure most of you know, Montgomery has an asterisk or a note there that indicates that in all but 2 of those dates, the Sunday hunting opportunities are limited to 10:30 a.m. And if you go back to the Washington County slide, if you kind of flash back to that in your brain, that's one of the elements that distinguishes, say, Washington County from Montgomery County in terms of opportunity for deer hunters.
So we wanted to just take a second as well to acknowledge the ethical component of hunting. This is something that we focus on very strongly, particularly during hunter education. And it's something that we subscribe to in terms of respecting natural resources, other hunters, landowners, and non-hunters. It's also part of Maryland's statute. So the natural resources article specifically prohibits the sale, barter, trade, or exchange for a game mammal taken from the wild. And in addition to the ethical reasons for not doing that, it is also an acknowledgement that it puts additional pressure on the deer population that can't be accounted for in the existing models that are used for calculating how much harvest we allow as a state. And lastly, we wanted to just make the point that frankly, it's not really necessary since most farmers and hunters are already willing to participate in hunting activities. And many of them are donating venison to food banks. However, there are some great examples of how to incentivize that venison donation without running afoul of ethics or Maryland code. And for example, Howard County, the Howard County executive announced a program recently that really checks a lot of boxes. And so those boxes are, first of all, having a funding source for the program. Second is meeting the Maryland law and the statute that we just described. It's ethical because it's not a payment to hunters directly or a prize directly for killing a deer. It's actually an incentive to donate the meat. So that also helps as far as a safety issue. There are food security issues and temperature control issues that need to be considered. So being sure to partner with a food bank and licensed processors is a really important component of their program. And last but not least, it is a really cost-effective program. Similarly, Montgomery County Office of Agriculture, I'm glad that there is an OAG rep on the meeting today. There is a similar program that encourages farmers and hunters to harvest deer responsibly. It's a partnership with a local farm company and KS Cuts to collect, process, and donate the venison to local area food banks. So last, just wrapping up, we wanted to talk about some of the deer management solutions that DNR has already implemented and that are underway. And then in our final slide, we'll talk about solutions for the future. But first and foremost is sector growth. In other words, getting more people to participate in hunting activities. So we have an R3 effort underway. This is a national program that Maryland is participating in to try to increase the diversity of our hunters and increase the number of our hunters. Similarly, we're using outreach activities like youth hunts and field days, veteran hunts and accessible hunts. And we also conducted a hunter attitude survey to better understand our customers in Maryland. Again, any education opportunity or any expanded hunting opportunity that we can provide is going to help with that sector growth. And we're taking very active measures to do that, including now the apprenticeship hunting program and mentored hunt days, with which the General Assembly has been very supportive of. We also talked about the DMP and the DCP options. Those are really important tools. We worked with Maryland Farm Bureau to make those specific changes for agricultural property owners, and we continue to work with them to make sure that they have access to these tools. We also wanted to mention Delegate Lutke's legislation, which was recently passed. So it will build on the existing income tax credit program for venison donations and eventually replace that with a grant program in our department. And we are working on drafting that grant program now, and it is scheduled to be implemented by July 1st of 2022 in accordance with the legislation. Delegate Mounts and Senator Astle also passed legislation that provides incentives through a state income tax credit for donations of venison. And we have been promoting that program through both press releases and in social media, and of course in our hunting guide. So wrapping up with potential future solutions that are specific to Montgomery County, the first recommendation that we have is to evaluate those measures that were passed in 2021. Since those are going to be implemented in FY23, it may take some time to ascertain how many people are participating and how effective they are. So we recommend evaluation as that program rolls out. We talked about this a lot throughout the presentation, but the more we can expand access to hunting opportunities, the more harvest we're going to see. So as Paul indicated, the Sunday hunting time restrictions in Montgomery County is something that you may want to consider. We've also had several conversations with Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Commission about their involvement in deer management. So we recommend continuing those public land options that you have in the county and continue to consult with them. As Paul mentioned, there are no DCP holders in Montgomery County. So expanding that and encouraging farmers to take advantage of that tool would probably really benefit in terms of harvest. We didn't talk about this much earlier, but there has been some concerns raised by agriculture landowners about insurance liability issues. So we would recommend exploring and clarifying whether that is really an issue that is preventing farmers from taking advantage of a DMP or a DCP. We are also going to be scoping regulations to expand night shooting under the deer cooperator permit to provide more months in the year for that to happen. Replicating the Howard County venison donation program that we discussed is also a recommendation. And then perhaps doing some test plots in Montgomery County on vegetative fencing and repellents. And then last but not least, we would love it if we could get more engagement from all of you and from the Maryland Farm Bureau and other organizations in our efforts to recruit more hunters in Maryland. And with that, Madam Chair, we are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for all of that. Thank you, everyone. What I'd like to do now is see if members have questions, and then I'd like to ask for input from the county folks. But first, are there members that have questions? I'm sorry, I meant legislative members. And I'll get to you in shortly. No? Okay.
Madam Chair.
Oh, yes. Delegate Gilchrist. I'm sorry. I couldn't see.
Corman, close enough.
Sorry, I saw both
I'm
of
only
you.
on Zooms with you twice a day.
Corman.
Madam Secretary, thanks for the presentation. On those test pilots, and maybe it was the third or fourth bullet of your last slide, what's the timeline on those?
So those are things that could be implemented now. So that's something that any farmland owner in Maryland could do. We have, and Colby may want to speak to this, but when we met with Maryland Farm Bureau's Wildlife Advisory committee, there are several farmers across the state that are already using these methods and finding them to be fairly successful. So we would encourage Montgomery County farmers to maybe try out some test plots as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Gilchrist and then Delegate Fraser Hidalgo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A month or two ago, there was an ag meeting at a farm up in western Montgomery County, and they were talking about the deer actually coming from the C&O Canal area. And they were talking about cooperating with the federal officials at the C&O Canal about what to do about that. Is that something that DNR has worked on?
I don't know if we have worked on it specifically to C&O Canal, so I will turn it over to Paul for that. I will say that we have a similar situation in Dorchester County with Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge, and we have worked very well with them on some ideas, some mentored hunts, et cetera, to help make sure that the populations on federal lands are not impacting local farmers. But do you want to talk about C&O specifically?
Yeah, so the C&O is one of those places where firearms are restricted. We have cooperated with the National Park Service successfully kind of in that region, and they've adopted some of the deer control operations. So the DCPs, they have shooters, and they actually contract with USDA, who has a team that does that work. I haven't heard about the C&O Canal specifically, but it would be an easy fit. I'd say generally easy fit to have the feds bring in that model into the C&O Canal. They have to go through a process to get there to include, NEPA requirements, et cetera. But we are set up to facilitate getting them there. And we've done it in, Antietam and Camp David and a lot of other places. So
thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Fraser Hidalgo.
Thank you. Just a few questions. In Montgomery County, we've done a lot to increase the ability for bow hunting and decrease safety zones for bow hunting. We've also done things on Sundays that allow for Sunday morning hunting. And that's, as I'm sure you're aware, kind of a great balance between the equestrian folks and the hunters. So when you talked about Sunday, is there something else that you would recommend besides those, 4 or 5 hours on Sunday mornings?
the question, Delegate, is there something else we would recommend?
Well, in one of your recommendations, you were talking about Sunday hunting, and we did open up Sunday hunting until 10 a.m. on certain days. So I'm wondering, but you had mentioned it in there. So I'm wondering, is there something else that you would recommend for Sunday hunting besides that?
So one of the things that we see that drives the increase in harvest is more opportunity for hunters. And we concur, there's a balance that has to be struck there. But if you look at, for example, the Washington County analogy that we use, they take somewhere in excess of 600 deer annually on Sundays alone. Montgomery County, you're about half of that right now, I think it was right at 300 last year. So I think the suggestion is if there was, if the will of the delegation was there, that you could expand, particularly on those prime windows of opportunity. So November, December. And if you recall, the chairman of your committee, he sort of sent us on this task of developing tiers for Sunday hunting. So there's sort of tier 1, which is the most expansive, and then tier 2 and tier 3. And then there's a couple counties that have a little bit different look, and that's where Montgomery County fits. So I guess if there was an inclination to move into one of those other tiers, you create more opportunity for hunters means more deer are taken.
Okay, yeah, I know that, when we expanded just for Sunday morning, that was a lot of negotiations and a lot of give and take by a lot of organizations. So to do more than that would require a lot a lot of compromise. But with that said, I did mention about bow hunting, and there has been talk within the delegation over the past couple of years about allowing Montgomery County to go to rifle cartridges as opposed to just bow hunting and shotguns. Do you have a comment on the population density, the rural nature of the ag reserve, and as to whether there are, what your kind of concerns may or may not be going to rifle hunting? Because that's come up a couple of times, and I know I've had some reservations about the discharge of rifles in the ag reserve, but I do understand from talking with you, Mr. Petito, that there are some more cartridges that are maybe don't quite have the reach as a traditional rifle cartridge, and I'm just wondering if there is an opinion or a recommendation on that, given the specifics of Montgomery County.
Yeah, so the good news is that we did, through the regulatory process, advance and move forward the use of the straight wall centerfire rifle cartridge option statewide for all of those counties that were limited to shotgun. That, it's relatively new, so we don't have the data yet to be able to say it's having what effect it might be having, but it's safe to say, I'm very comfortable saying that it is a tool that provides sort of what you were trying to get at, I think, Delegate, is that balance between something that is more effective than a shotgun, frankly, safer to use because it is more accurate and at the same time has less downrange energy than a traditional centerfire rifle would. And I think there's folks actually on this call who've adopted those technologies. I know a bunch of people who have. I don't know that there's significant value today in going to the next level of centerfire rifles. They are used by our deer cooperators, and there's some advantage in terms of total downrange energy. You shoot firearms, you understand that. But in Montgomery County, I think I guess I would say I'd give it a little time to let's see if these straight wall cartridges are providing the opportunity to sort of reach out in a manner that's safer than, say, the traditional centerfire arms.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Would it be possible for you all to circulate those slides?
Absolutely. Yeah, we can email them to you.
Great, thank you. Anne, you had a question?
That was it. Could we please have copies of the slides? Thank you.
There you go. Okay. Mark, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. One of the things we're running into this year in Montgomery County is a hindrance in our ability to use the deer donation program. The shortfall or the bottleneck to it is the problem with KS Cuts. Chris has been having problems hiring enough people, his usual people. He's lost. The problem that is happening throughout the economy of problems of hiring people is striking him, and they're very limited on what they can take. Right now, they've been okay, but he said that at any time he may be cutting off what he can take in. He will not be taking them 24 hours, only staying open till 8, which really cuts into evening huntings, especially this time of year. And because he's doing the processing for the Poolsville Dropbox as well, that's really cutting into things. So we have a real limitation on the ability to donate deer that's going to be coming to a head very soon once we hit muzzleloader and especially shotgun seasons.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And it is insightful and helpful to us as we think about the future. And I agree that it is definitely a nationwide issue, the labor shortage, particularly around our food supply right now. So if there's anything that we can do to assist, please let us know.
Thank you. Did anyone from the county want to step in and add anything?
I'll speak for just a second. We've long partnered with DNR, and so I don't have a lot of information to add. That would be much different than what they suggested. But much like their data, the data that we're collecting and analyzing also demonstrates that there's a downward trend for deer populations and deer impacts in the county. We collect both deer population density data from a variety of means, from drone surveys to camera surveys. All are demonstrating decreasing trends. And we also monitor closely the deer vehicle strikes in Montgomery County. And while the numbers have been relatively static, the number per capita has been declining steadily through the years. So we're encouraged. We do ask for your patience. We recognize that this has been a 25-year plus effort, but we are seeing our efforts bear fruit. I will note that to date, approximately 50,000 acres of public lands in Montgomery County have some manner of deer population management, from traditional hunting to very non-traditional contraceptives, for example. Montgomery Parks, we own 37,000 acres of parkland, and currently 21,000 acres are under deer population management, and we continue to add to that effort annually. We do have capacity limitations, but on average, we're expanding by approximately 500 acres per year. So we continue to make an effort, and we are ever vigilant to address this manner of reducing impacts. It is notable, there needs to be a paradigm shift, particularly with the agricultural community. There has been a relative unwillingness to try new things, so to speak. And certainly these are private properties, so that it is more difficult than maybe the public entity experiences. And I also want to make it clear, it's a comprehensive approach. In addition to harvesting deer, we all need to be willing and able to try some of the other matter of efforts that DNR suggested, like fencing, like vegetation management for encouraging browsing of non-crop vegetation and things of that matter. But we are making progress. I think that there needs to be more data collected from the agricultural community to determine the impact. I think we're finding that the number of acres of agriculture in Montgomery County is declining. The size of agricultural properties in Montgomery County is declining. That means the field to edge ratio. And sometimes it's a matter of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So some of that stochastic variability is difficult to determine. And it would be helpful from the agricultural community if they could assist to provide the data by which they determine impacts and the extent that which we can help to benefit them improve those impacts.
Thank you. I had 2 things that I wanted to follow up on. The first was the issue of CNO that Delegate Gilchrist brought up. Madam Secretary, you and your team, it sounds like you have a way to address this. So can you follow up with us on that?
Yes, most definitely. I think we all made a note of that, and we'll see if that we can facilitate a conversation there.
Fantastic. Living right near the CNO Canal, I appreciate that.
I can address that. I can address that quickly.
Great.
So the National Park Service expanded deer population management on the day use area of the CNO Canal to the east, to the DC line, about 3 years ago. They used the deer cooperator permit that Mr. Petito referred to, which is nighttime sharpshooting. He also referred to their bureaucracy. They have to do environmental impact statements and contend for federal dollars. And so they prioritize those projects very distinctly. So at the moment, there is no intent to expand because there is a quite significant environmental impact process that they need to go through. But in the future, I think it's highly likely that they will expand to the western portions of the CNO Canal along the Monocacy River.
Thank you. The other question I had was the liability issue. I know in your last slide, you mentioned something about following up on insurance and liability. And I was curious what the plan was. It seemed pretty vague. Is that something you all are looking into? Is that something you are encouraging someone else to look into? If you could just speak to that, please.
Sure. So it's really both. We had heard anecdotally that members of the agriculture community in Maryland were hesitant to allow individual hunters to come onto their property to help with the harvest because of that liability issue. We have checked with MIA, we have a question in the Maryland Farm Bureau about that. Anecdotally, when I met with farmers in Dorchester County a couple of weeks ago, I asked that question and none of them seemed to be concerned about it. So we're really trying to identify whether it's localized or if it's specific participants in the industry. So any information that anyone has or can share on that, we would really be interested in, because we want the ag community to take advantage of those deer management permits and those deer cooperator permit opportunities.
Thank you. Mark?
Yes, regarding the question of liability, it's something we run into with a number of private property owners as well. Invariably, the question of liability comes up, especially when we're dealing with communities and homeowners associations. So it's not only an issue in the ag community, it's also in the suburban areas.
Thank you. So we look forward to hearing more on that as well. Bob, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Bob Sissel from MAP, Montgomery Agricultural Producers. So a couple answers to questions. QDMA, Quality Deer Management Association, has a relationship with an insurance company where landowners can purchase a limited liability policy. So if a landowner or farmer allows people to hunt on the farm, such as a hunt club, or he or she wants to lease the property, you can get a $2 million limited liability policy through QDMA for about $275 a year. And it protects the landowner and the hunters from a liability perspective. We do that on many farms, and many farmers, members of MAP, require hunters to have that policy in effect for, say, a hunt club of 5 or 10 people that hunt, on a 400 or 500 acre farm. So the insurance is out there. I think the broader question is, from a legal standpoint, on a state standpoint, there is a limited liability about using land for recreational use. And probably we need more detail about that. Paul, I have a question for you on the harvest record that comes out every year for the state. Does that include DMPs and everything? Are those numbers in there too?
So Bob, we do an annual deer report, and it breaks it down by regular hunter harvest, deer management permit, and deer cooperator permit. We also include reported vehicle mortality. So when you see the season ending press release, for example, that is only hunter harvest. If it doesn't say DMPs or DCPs, it's not in there.
Is there a way to get that information for me from a management perspective for farmers and stuff to see what the broad number is? Is that open to the public?
Yeah, we break it down in our annual deer report, which is available on the site, but I'll share it.
Yeah, I've seen that one. That comes out later. Yeah. Okay, great. We were talking about what is commonly referred to as food plots, which are the vegetation plots that you can do around a bean field or a cornfield to try to have the deer eat those as opposed to eating the grain crops. We do that quite a bit. A lot of hunt clubs do that. Some of our farmers, our members of MAP, do plant plots around the edges of the woods to try to hold the deer in there instead of eating corn, soybean, and wheat. They can be expensive. Obviously, you're not, wreaking a direct benefit, but the benefit in the grand scheme of things is hopefully the deer eat less of the, cash crops that you're growing. On one particular farm, it's 230 acres. We have 6 acres of borderline food plots, and we have found them to be very helpful. So, especially if you put tillage radishes or something like that, where, the deer fill up on those, and it's like eating an apple. The deer's belly fills quickly, and they feel that they're full. But it does have a cost involved in it. The straight wall cartridge, Paul, I think is going to be in the long term very successful. I know many people, hunters, long-term hunters, have switched over to them. It's something between a rifle and a shotgun that is more accurate, doesn't travel as far as a rifle, but does travel farther and get a little bit longer distance shooting for deer management. So it's a good weapon, and it's getting a lot of play and a lot of talk in the hunting community. So I thought you'd want to know that. I think that's really the only other question I had about the urban hunting areas. As I read the restrictions of for female deer with a bow statewide, the bag limit is 15, unless your county is part of a urban area, and it lists 5 counties. Is that correct, Paul?
That's correct. It's Montgomery, Prince George's, Howard, Baltimore, and Anne Arundel.
So does that include the entire county?
It does.
So if a bow hunter, and I think Mark would appreciate this because it was a question I've gotten from a number of hunters. When they first look at that bag limit of 15 with bow, if you're, they figure that's the limit. And the question is for urban hunting for the entire county of Montgomery County, because that's who we're talking about today. There's no limit on does in Montgomery County with a bow.
Correct.
Okay, so that goes for the entire county, not for some specific area in the county.
No, we do it on a county by county basis.
There we go. That's confirming what you and I talked about, Jeremy. That's it, guys. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take up so much time, but I wrote some brief questions down and I'll listen.
No, that's great, Bob. Thank you. I appreciate that. Colby, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Delegate. I just wanted to kind of put a little bit of understanding on maybe where that question on the liability is coming from. We did do I did some calls and trying to figure out where that was coming from. And really where I have found it to be most concerning is on rented ground, that a farmer that applies for a deer management permit and needs the landowner to sign off on it. The landowner has some concerns on whether the landowner would hold the liability, would have to have the liability if the farmer holds the liability, since the farmer is the one that's going to have the agents there doing that. So I think it's just a clarification of who would assume some sort of liability if there happened to be damage, whether it be individual falling out of a tree or whatever it might be under the crop damage permit threshold. Is where does that liability fall, and what kind of assurances can that landowner that owns the rented land have to give a little bit more leniency on allowing the farmer to use that. So I think that's where most of the concerns are. I will say that on another discussion topic that you had, which was the C&O Canal, from the discussions we've had, I think there was some discussion earlier about that the county has looked at talking with the C&O Canal, and exactly what was said, which is that problem with the environmental assessment really has deterred the C&O Canal Park to move anywhere at all or budge at all. So I think that's going to need some assistance on whether it be a letter from the governor or letter from the Montgomery County delegation or both. Something's got to be done to try to get and maybe even something from the congressmen and senators to help push that, because they're not budgeting at all from everything we're seeing.
And if my add to that, Paul, if you need a couple of farmers that farm the edge of the C&O Canal in Montgomery County, I can get you a couple of farmers that can document their losses where their properties border the C&O Canal.
Great. Thank you, Colby and Bob. And Anne, you had your hand up?
I did, thank you. I have a 90-acre farm and I have a handful of deer hunters who hunt here from the beginning of bow season through the end of bow season. I'm completely supportive of doing that and trying to help the farmers who have crop damage from the deer. However, I would like to emphasize something that Delegate David Frazier Hidalgo said. The non-hunters in Montgomery County feel like they gave up a lot in giving up early Sunday mornings to hunters. It means we cannot go out on trails, and people worry about being on bicycles, hiking, certainly on horseback where you're a little bit higher and you're maybe in the woods. We don't go on Saturdays during deer season, and now we don't go on early Sunday mornings, but we absolutely treasure the fact that from 11 o'clock on Sundays, we can be in the woods, in the country, in the ag reserve, and wherever else in Montgomery County. So please, please, please respect that for us.
Thank you, Anne. I hear that loud and clear. I am a former equestrian, so I hear you. And I know that the committee considers that. And I believe it was Delegate Frazier Hidalgo's bill, and he helped to bring people together. So thank you all for coming to that. And I don't think there's any intent to change that. Notwithstanding, I respectfully to the DNR folks. Okay, I don't see any other hands up. Does anybody else have anything up? Bob, yes.
Paul, one thing that might help, because Sunday hunting I know has been very successful throughout the state, and we worked. God bless David Frazier Hidalgo. He just did an awesome job working with the group and us working with the Horse Council and Ann and other folks and Jane Siegler to do the 10:30 on Sunday mornings. If there was a way to expand the bow season through February, that might give our hunters an opportunity to get a little ahead of the game that they lose on Sunday afternoons. Of course, we're talking about bow season. Not asking for another rifle or a shotgun season in February, but currently the bow season ends the end of January, as you all know. If we could go through the end of February, I think we could make up some of those numbers that we don't get on a full day Sunday hunt, and it wouldn't affect anybody. Most people aren't in the woods very much in the month of February anyway, and it's all on private land. So that might be a solution. What do you think about that, Jeremy? Can't hear you, Jeremy.
You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, one of the items that did come up at the August 5th Farmside chat that Colby alluded to earlier is to look at the month of February to see if there's opportunities for extending seasons for different weapons, and to see if we could create more incentives for increasing the number of hunters that we have in the state, because the last time I checked, I believe the number of sport hunters is declining in the state of Maryland. And so that is a trend that is definitely a challenge. I know that Madam Secretary talked about some of the educational initiatives that they're working on to create opportunities for new hunters, and I think that is really a great idea. I just have heard from the farm community that they would like to see more opportunities for hunters during the normal hunting season to harvest more deer. And they're looking at February as a way to do that. The Commonwealth, their hunting season goes through the end of March. So that was one of the items that hasn't really come up today that we did discuss at the Farmside Chat back in August.
Thank you, Jeremy. We're at 4:58, so I see that Anne has her hand up, and then we may need, and Bill, and then we may need to kick this conversation perhaps to email or another date, because we do have to end at 5, but Anne and then Bill, and then we'll close out.
I would not be happy giving up all the Saturdays and Sunday mornings in February myself. But in addition, I think do you really want to be shooting pregnant does and fawns?
You're shooting pregnant does and fawns, not fawns, but pregnant does in November, December, and January. Almost all those does are pregnant. The breeding season ends in the middle of
Bill,
January.
you had a comment? Thanks.
Yeah, I just
sorry to
want
cut you off, but
mention-
we do have to end in a minute. Go ahead, Bill, and then we'll be done.
Montgomery Parks relies heavily on the deer cooperator permit, as does many of the federal properties in the county. A few years ago, DNR changed the allowance. They would not let us utilize January with the deer cooperator permit because of the hunting season. So now we have to wait to February. March is very restrictive. I speak on behalf of myself and on behalf of USDA Wildlife Services. So if we extended the bow hunting season, we would not be supportive of that if it meant further reduction in the allowance of the deer cooperator permit from the state.
Got it.
Fair enough.
All right, everyone, as you can see, my son is here, so we need to end here. Thank you all very much. I really appreciate your time and your comments and all of your hard work, and we will be in touch. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everybody.